Get ready to plant some green, because Garden for Wildlife is here to make your garden thrive and the planet buzz with life.
Next Pitch TV showcases the most innovative equity crowdfunding campaigns for the verdict of the crowd.
Let me introduce you to the visionary behind this blooming venture, Shubber Ali. With a passion for conservation and a knack for innovation, Shubber is on a mission to revolutionize the way we interact with our natural surroundings.
So, first of all, welcome to Next Pitch TV, where we showcase the most innovative equity crowdfunding campaigns for the verdict of the crowd. So, Shubber, would you be so kind as to give our audience an idea of what exactly Garden for Wildlife is all about?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Rob. So Garden for Wildlife is a business that was created actually as a program inside of the National Wildlife Federation over 50 years ago as a way to educate people about the importance of native plants and habitat in protecting the biodiversity of our environment, the species, the pollinators, the birds, all of that. And since 1973, they've done a great job of educating people with that, and in fact, even created over 300,000 certified wildlife habitat. That's people's yards, schoolyards. My house is now a certified habitat as well. And this is all to help the dwindling populations of things like Native American bees. 1 in 4 of our species of bees in North America are actually in danger of extinction. You know, the monarch people know about, all kinds of things like that. About 4 years ago, while I was at Accenture as a partner in innovation, I actually went and worked with them to solve a problem that I had, but that actually lots of people have. You know, there's over 100 million gardeners in the U.S. and they spend almost $50 billion a year on gardening, but most of it is buying basically what's called junk plants. And what I mean by that are these are the pretty plants you see at big box garden centers. I've bought those for decades, not knowing any better, but they're actually all invasive species. I spent 3 hours Googling all the plants in my local Lowe's to find that not a single one was native to my part of the Mid-Atlantic. They were all from other parts of the world. And so I went to the National Wildlife Federation, which is almost 100-year-old, one of the leading environmental organizations in the U.S., and I said, we need to solve this problem because it's not enough to make people aware of the importance of native plants. It's not enough to educate them as to what's native to where they live. You have to make it easy for them to get. And that's the last piece of the puzzle. And so we actually helped them build an e-commerce site called GardenForWildlife.com inside of the National Wildlife Federation. Fast forward about a year and a half, I was actually the very first customer too. Those plants are thriving in my yard. And we fast forward about a year and a half and actually told them, look, you need to spin this out and create a for-profit business that you are a big shareholder of, but then you can bring in outside investors and grow it a lot faster because a not-for-profit can't hire the right kind of e-commerce talent and all the things you need and bring in investment because you're not for profit. They agreed and spun it out as a separate company. They'd asked me to come in and be the CEO as part of that because in addition to helping them create the platform, I've built multiple companies previously. And so they said, we don't know how to run this thing. Can you come in and run this? So I came in about a year and a half ago and have been running GardenForWildlife.com, which NWF, again, it owns about 80% of the company, but then we have other investors and then the employees have shares as well. That's who we are.
Fascinating. I mean, it's very interesting that you mentioned that you had previous experience with startups already. This is actually delightfully common for equity crowdfunding startups or startups doing equity crowdfunding campaigns, that the founders have already had experience in the field. But this brings me actually to the next question, which is, okay, very interesting the way you point out that it makes sense to have a for-profit section here, even though the National Wildlife Foundation, as you say, has been around for a very long time and so forth. So why did you decide to take the equity crowdfunding route as opposed to conventional finance that we're both familiar with, especially given that your Accenture background?
Well, actually, it's not either or. So as part of spinning out, we actually did a safe round. We had originally targeted $4 million and it was actually oversubscribed and we raised $5 million, which we closed that round last October. And then we kicked off the equity round. And so the safe round was led by the National Wildlife Federation. So they were the biggest investor in addition to then other investors that came in. I even invested in the company as well as part of the safe round because that would capitalize this new company that spun out, right? So it could fight all the operation and the rest. The reason to reach out to equity crowdfunding is, quite frankly, this is something that everybody can have an impact in. Everybody can play a role in because it doesn't matter if you have a balcony or if you have a yard, you can put some native plants out there and you will help make a difference. So the way I like to describe this is, and I've done some work with university groups. In fact, we had a big Earth Day planting yesterday at University of Maryland. We're running a competition amongst a bunch of universities here in the DC area, and they're all designing and planting gardens that we're donating. And then one will win, but we were at a planting event for Earth Day yesterday. And one of the things that really has resonated in talking, especially with Gen Zers and university students and people of that age, is almost every single environmental problem out there seems daunting. Like it's almost too big to do anything about, whether it's carbon in the atmosphere, plastic in the Pacific Ocean, water pollution, the drought, any pesticides, all kinds of things. And you can do the right thing. Like I drive an electric car. You can use a metal straw instead of a plastic straw. You can use a recycling shopping bag, but you're not going to see a difference. You're not going to, other at your own individual level, you're not going to see carbon disappearing from the sky or any of these things. But with this, you can make a difference in your own yard with one set of plants. And I know this for a fact. Not only have I done it to my own yard, but a good friend of mine, actually, who I worked with at Accenture many years ago, and then at Salesforce, he lives in the Loop in Chicago. And I said, look, you need to put some plants on your balcony. He said, I'm in the middle of the city. Nothing's going to show up. And I said, trust me. And if I'm wrong, I'll pay you for the plants you put in. So he got some pots and he put in some native plants. And he texts me a month later, and I still have the text on my phone. He was so excited. He says, dude, you won't believe this. There's a monarch on my balcony, right? It's like nature just needs a little bit of a help. And we've spent the last 250 years ripping out everything native in this country and putting in these sterile lawns and landscapes and invasive species from other parts of the world. So now it's our turn to do a little bit to help bring it back. You don't have to get rid of your whole lawn. You don't have to get rid of your whole garden, but even a corner will make a difference. And that's why we're doing the crowdfunding, because everybody that's watching this, everybody who's listening to this thing, the millions of members of the National Wildlife Federation, they all want to do something. And here's a way they can make a small difference. And they can invest in it as well, because this is a $50 billion industry. So it's not like this is a not profit. This is actually a great business opportunity.
Now, it's interesting that you set the minimum investment at $250. You are probably aware that the lowest typical amount is about $100. Mm-hmm. Why did you set it so high? The reason why I'm asking is because if you set it or had set it at $100, my guess would be that it attracts a lot of people who, quite frankly, aren't in a position to put in $250. And since there's no considerable additional cost, whether somebody invests 100 or 250 or 500, one would have thought that would be perhaps the right move.
Yeah, we discussed that a bit internally and with our crowdfunding advisors. And this is one of those questions of kind of like, how long is a piece of string? Or if you've ever done a pitch to a VC, it's always, do I have the right slides? There's never the right answer. You're always going to hear something different. We thought that, given the amount of overhead we had to pay on managing the investments versus the amount of being invested, that 250 seemed like a reasonable threshold for the target we were going after. Should we do this again, another year, because you can only do, the 12-month cycles and the rest? If we decide to do this again, and I don't see a reason why we wouldn't want to keep reaching out to the general public, the more people become aware of this, the more people we can attract to this over time. We might open it up to a lower threshold in the future.
Now, it's interesting in that you're using DealMaker here, which stands out. It's definitely a very prominent platform these days. But what is very interesting is that DealMaker, as you are aware, basically helps you create your own campaign, meaning you could say there's no competition, i.e. it's yours or nothing. And that has its advantages. On the other hand, we found a start engine and what have you, typically means that if you run a campaign, it is also exposed to the rest of their investors, I suppose, which has a kind of benefit in its own right, especially if you have enough funding to promote it. So is that something that you think you might want to consider in the future?
So it's certainly an interesting question. Again, this is our first go at crowdfunding, and we did this really as a way to just add almost like an extra sidecar fuel tank and open this up to the general public. Because again, we just done the safe round in October, so this is really on the back of that. because of the nature of where we come from, the National Wildlife Federation, of course, already had this program. We're just now a commercial part of that. They have a mailing list with millions of members, right? They have already built marketplace, which is why we decided to go for the route of let's go and do our own invest.gardenforwildlife.com instead of on one of these other platforms where they host you and do all the rest of that, right? And if we did the other route, then there would be more marketing expense, more of the things up front. And we thought, let's test the value of our own mailing list, right? We didn't know how responsive the National Wildlife Federation's mailing list is because, of course, it's been accumulated over decades and they have lots of other programs. And, you have to kind of find out how useful a mailing list is. And this is just, for us, it was an experiment. And so would I look at using other platforms? I'm certainly open to considering them. And it's always, as an expression I've learned, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? It's like you have to look at it and say, is the ROAS, the return on spend, developing the investment worth it? What we also have is a base of customers, which, again, we've been in business now for a little over 2 years. And so we have tens of thousands of customers. And that's actually a really good target group because we have, unique incentives for them if you're a customer that are different than if you're just a everyday investor.
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, just to make sure there's no misunderstanding, if you wanted to, let's assume the campaign, I think, has give or take a week to go. And assuming that it is not extended, which, by the way, is one of the unique aspects of equity crowdfunding. What? You can extend a campaign by whatever, 6 months or whatever you like. That's unheard of in regular crowdfunding. But the point is that you, as you probably are aware, you can raise up to $5 million per year. That means, in other words, theoretically, if you wanted to, you could, especially given that you already have all your materials, say, let's try whatever, platform X or whatnot, see what that would yield so that you have something to compare. But that's not really the primary purpose of the of our show here. We basically want to showcase the most innovative campaigns. And I love the way that, arguably in a very American way, what you're doing, and I say that in terms of being a capitalist way, what you're doing is to address an issue that clearly you've recognized, created the infrastructure for within the umbrella of the National Wildlife Federation, and now it's going on. I love it. That is just exactly what I think modern capitalism can and should be about. So that is
I agree.
really
Thank you.
Delightful to see. I mean, for you personally, it must have been an incredible change from Accenture. I mean, my God. I mean, everyday suit and tie, I would imagine, in the past.
I have plenty of, actually now my son's big enough that he wears my suits because I haven't worn them really in almost years now, but except when you go into like some formal event. No, it is to me, like, I don't know that it's, in some ways it's brand new for me because I've never been in the plant business before. I've been a gardener for decades just as a hobby, vegetables as well as, flowers and shrubs and stuff, and now native plants. But having done startups before, it's no different, right? Startups are startups at the most basic level. It's the same kinds of things, whether it's managing your growth of your people, managing cash flow, which is the single biggest thing every startup has to deal with. And the single biggest failure point is not managing cash flow, right? And so I'm very fortunate. I've got a great CFO at this company to help with making sure we keep all that, in check. But it's an operations business, right? We just happen to deliver plants to people's doorsteps, but we're an e-commerce company, and people go to our website, they punch in their zip code, and this is part of like our secret sauce. This is one of the great things that we got from the National Wildlife Federation is that they built over decades something called the Native Plant Finder database. And so part of the trouble with native plants is what's native? Like, how do you know what's native where you are, right? And so people won't take time to do research. People don't take time to do almost anything. They're so busy flitting from thing to thing to thing, right? So what we said is, look, they built this great database where literally they have every single tree, shrub, and perennial flower in North America at the zip code level. So we took that And that's our basis for our shop. So when you go into the shop, the first thing it asks is, what's your zip code? As soon as you punch in your zip code, it only shows you what's native to where you live. So you can't accidentally buy the wrong stuff. It won't let you. And then when you're done and you've picked, and you can filter, like, one of the things that we added last year, which I think is awesome, is if you think of Yelp, it's Yelp-like filtering. So you can say, if you say, I want to go and have lunch and I want it to be Italian and $2 signs and open right now, and they do delivery and they've got vegetarian options, you can filter for all of that on Yelp, and then you will only see those restaurants, right? Well, you can do the same thing here. I only want flowers that are this color, like red or yellow or whatever. I want them to be this tall. I want them to bloom only in the summer or in the spring or in the fall. I want them to help hummingbirds. I want them for dry soil or moist soil or clay or whatever. I want them for sun or shade. You can do all the filtering, and it will only show you what's available for that. And then you just click buy, and I don't know if you could be able to see this very well, but they show up in this really cool, you can't see this yet. Turn off my background for you to be able to see it, but box. Box shows up on your doorstep. I'm holding up this imaginary box you can almost see. This beautiful box shows up on your doorstep via FedEx, and you open it up. And the great thing about native plants is they are actually cheaper in the long run than the stuff you buy at the big box garden centers, because those are annuals. You have to buy them every year, and then every year you have to spend hours in the garden digging holes and putting plants in and all the rest. Perennials come back by themselves every year. So they're cheaper in the long run. After like 2 or 3 years, they've paid for themselves without the labor. But also, you don't need fertilizers, you don't need pesticides, you don't need all that stuff, because they're native. Like, they evolved to be right here. So you just dig a hole, put them in, add a little bit of water, a little bit of mulch, you're done. And every year they're going to come back bigger and more beautiful. I mean, it's a pretty great business, and we have customers who also come back every year and buy more.
And it also makes for great presents, I would imagine. I mean, now, do you your fulfillment, I'm assuming, comes out of one equivalent of warehouse somewhere there, or what?
No, actually, so we've built a network of growers across multiple states, and we're adding more growers all the time. So growers tend to be, we have a lot of growers who tend to be like small family businesses, and they do the fulfillment. So we actually, they have these boxes on site and the containers, the rest. They grow the plants for us under contract. And then as the orders come in, they're routed through an order management system we have. They get a FedEx label that's printed for them right there. They've got a little, standard printer that prints it out, Zebra printer. And then they put the order in the box, slap the label on it. FedEx shows up once every few days or every week, depending on which grower it is. And the boxes go out. So we have growers in like Colorado, Carolina, Wisconsin, Connecticut, Florida, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we keep adding more. And we're in 42 states already, 41 or 42, I can't remember which one it is, but we will be hopefully across the rest of the Western U.S. and on the contiguous U.S. by the end of next year. And we're trying to grow as fast as possible, because we have customers already banging on our door from California that we can't fulfill because we don't have a grower out there. And different regions have different plants that are native to them. So the plants that we grow here in Virginia, for instance, we can't ship them to California because they're the wrong plants.
No, I totally get it. I mean, the interesting part is that on the one hand, alone for that reason, i.e., if you want native plants in Wyoming, just to make an example, then it makes every sense to have a growing operation that is in Wyoming. But there's an additional benefit, obviously, which is, well, in relative terms, the footprint for the transportation is also much lighter, shorter, more correct, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So that's a nice 2-for-1 special, as it were.
That's exactly right. And it actually, part of our longer term business model gets into some of that in a lot more detail about distribution centers. But I was actually asked this at an event last week where somebody had said, what about Home Depot or Lowe's? Do you see them as competitors? And I said, they're not a competitor because they don't grow plants. They sell other people's plants in their store almost on consignment. Like, they only pay the vendors when they're scanned at the register, right? So what we want to be is actually in those garden centers with the native plants section, with National Wildlife Federation's logo and our logo, and all of our great partners. We have partnerships now with really big not-for-profits that also add a huge halo around us that give us differentiation. And here's the thing: the way that I tell people by analogy is, if you think about the grocery store, 20 years ago, organics were very hard to find. Now you can go into any grocery store, not just Whole Foods, and find organic products, right? But even better, you go into the dairy section now, and 2 out of the 5 cabinets in my dairy section at my Safeway grocery store near my house are actually plant-based milk, right? 2 out of 5. 40% of that market is now plant-based milk. Whereas 20 years ago, you might be lucky if you found soy milk somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So when people become more aware of and educated about why natives are important and why the plants they're putting in right now are actually hurting the environment, not helping, they will, like me, I believe, switch over if you make it easy for them. So if they're walking into Lowe's and the natives are right there, it becomes even easier for them to buy. And that's an even better model for us to do it. So we've already got our first retail partner, which is actually Wild Birds Unlimited. We just signed them up not too long ago. We're already starting to do distribution in some of their stores. They're a franchise business with 350 locations in the US and Canada. And their clientele are bird lovers, right? This is Wild Birds Unlimited. And so people who buy bird seed and bird houses and bird baths and the rest, birds, the reason they've been disappearing, songbirds have been disappearing over the last few decades, 3 billion pairs have been disappearing, is because of the loss of native habitat, because there's a really clear connection. Native plants provide the food for the pollinators. Milkweed is the most extreme example with monarchs. Everybody knows about you need milkweed for monarchs, right? It's because the caterpillars need it, not the adults. The adults can eat it off of other flowering plants too. But other caterpillars as well, there are lots of different species out there, have been dwindling. And when caterpillars dwindle, what ends up happening is the birds disappear because the birds need the caterpillars to feed their young. It's not for the adults. You can feed them with bird feeders all day long. But if they don't have food for their babies, you don't get adult birds after a while, right? So it seems really obvious when you say it out loud. And that's why there was such an obvious partnership with them, with Wild Birds Unlimited, is they're now selling through an affiliate program our plants to their customers so that we ship them directly to the customer, but they're actually bringing us the customers. And then some of the stores are already ordering plants to actually sell in store as well. So this is part of our, kind of growth strategies to find great aligned partners and just hit that market, make them aware, educate them, and then make it available.
I love it. I mean, it's an interesting thing. As you may be aware, every week we showcase a different category. It could be something like technology, AI, or a theme like female founders. In your case, the category was ag tech. And I have to say, I'm amazed at the developments, not just in case of your company, but all the ones that we are talking to and so on. Wow, ag tech is really quite fascinating, more than I certainly ever realized. And what you're doing is really path-breaking. So I certainly wish you all the very best of luck on this. We will get this published tomorrow. And so that obviously, otherwise, what's the point? You need it sooner than later. So thank you very much indeed for coming on to the interview. And I wish you all the very best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
And that's a wrap. Don't miss out on the opportunity to invest in Garden for Wildlife, where every dollar contributes to greener spaces and a healthier planet, all while redefining how we interact with nature. To know more about the featured campaign, subscribe now to nextpitch.tv.